Follow along with me as I read Island Rodeo Queen. I'm going to share my screen. About this text, award-winning author Yamil Saeed Mendez was born in Argentina, but has spent most of her life in Utah. In this short story, a Puerto Rican teen vying for rodeo queen wonders whether she will have to leave one community behind to embrace another. And we're going to look out for these words confrontational and narrating. Island Rodeo Queen by Yamil Saeed Mendez. 3 miles from the next exit to Andromeda, Utah, population 1,500, our old Chevy Silverado slowed down on the last uphill, then rocked forward and backward, jostling Poppy and me in the overheated cabin. Keep going, I chanted, as if the truck could understand me. Poppy said his own kind of muttered prayer behind the wheel. He had to make it to the Spanish class where he taught teachers and medical professionals on Saturdays, and I couldn't be late to horsemanship practice, my weakest queening event. Public speaking? No problem. I could out-argue my lawyer mom, even if she wasn't exactly practicing. She was still studying for the Utah bar exam. Presentation? In my abuelita Irmer's words, in my parade clothes, I was stunning. And having been involved with the Puerto Rican Miss Universe contest for years, she knew a thing or two about pageants. But queening was more than a beauty contest or a debate. A rodeo queen carried the American flag at events like parades. She was the face of the rodeo, the representative of the sport that ruled out here in the West. And I still didn't know my reining pattern perfectly. The voice of my horse riding trainer, Melinda Hill, echoed in my mind. If you're going to be the next Andromeda rodeo queen, you must be perfect, Corrali. Punctuality is a mark of respect. Whatever reason I gave her for being late today, she said it was an excuse. Come on, I said. The truck tried, but a few seconds later, the engine sputtered its apology, and finally, an ominous hiss broke the expectant silence of the desert. At least it happened after we finished delivering our goodies. Adios mio, Poppy lamented as he maneuvered the dead truck to the shoulder of the road, out of the way of speeding cars and semis. My native Spanish was rusty from lack of use, but I understood his words. The black cash box on my lap wasn't that heavy, but the earnings would have paid for my rodeo fees. Now we'd have to use it to fix the truck unless I dipped into my savings or the money for Abuelita Irma's Western Union was late. But no, we could never do that. She depended on that money, even if she protested every time we sent it. Nina, use it for your Reina contest, she always said. It makes me happy to see you happy. Now each training had extra meaning. Each queening item I brought became more important because of Abuelita. And now, Poppy asked. Before I could reply, he took out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Although most of the people lived a continent and an ocean away, we moved from Puerto Rico to Utah 10 years ago when I was 7. Back then, we were some of the only Spanish speakers in the area, and my parents had a hard time making the kind of friends that became family. But there were a few incondicionales, as mommy called them. In the States, there was only time for work, and all the work and sacrifices my parents and all of our families were for me and my future. I was their chance for new beginnings and happily ever afters. And if I became the next rodeo queen, the scholarship that came with it would open doors to opportunities that were only dreams. I would certainly make all of the years trying to put down roots in this area worth it. When I was the rodeo queen, that would mean there was room for my family this far from home. Juan Carlos is already on the way up in Salt Lake, Poppy finally said. He met Juan Carlos when we first arrived at the pet food factory. Poppy's main job to this day, besides being like family, Juan Carlos was one of our customers. The 30 or so Caribbean and Latin American transplants who, like our family, had made a home in this developing valley of dairy farms and cornfields. Our customers had been solid in supporting my dream of becoming Andromeda's new rodeo queen. A few months ago, during one of our weekly Skype calls, Abuelita Irma had suggested we make pastels and other Puerto Rican foods to pay for my cleaning expenses. So we did. Our friends shared my Instagram posts with their neighbors and friends. Even non Latinos eagerly waited for our pastels. Abuelita's recipes were irresistible. All of our customers had so much hope invested in me, and now our truck was dead. I'm sorry, I said. Poppy patted my shoulder, encouraged by the gesture. I tentatively took my phone out of my pocket to send an SOS message to Trenton. Poppy huffed, but he didn't complain. We had no other choice. Poppy couldn't tell an alternator from a carburetor, and Trent was the only one person besides my father who would drop everything to come get me if I was stuck inside a volcano. And unlike other boys I knew, Trent didn't even expect a kiss in return when he did something nice for me, like invite me to homecoming or prom. I couldn't say he was my boyfriend. Our relationship was in a murky in between. Everything else in my life was in between, so why not him? Maybe next year, after my cleaning responsibilities were fulfilled, we could date. But first, I had to win. I sent the text and immediately put my phone away before I was tempted to check my social media. Ever since I'd become a finalist, my mentions were a mixture of pride and good wishes, doubts that I had what it took to represent the town, and sometimes even hateful private messages from anonymous accounts. I never told my parents, Trent or Melinda. I didn't want to give haters the power to make my family and friends unhappy. But the truth was, the seed of doubt had taken root in my heart. With the rodeo only a week away, the dark voices blared louder than the positive ones. It's like being inside an oven, Poppy said, pointing at the thermometer in the dashboard. It marked triple digits already in early June. The air outside the truck shimmered with heat. At least we have empanadillas and drinks in the cooler. Do you want a Malta? Poppy considered my offer for a second, then said, okay, it's too hot to wait inside the truck anyway. We got out of the truck, and carefully, Poppy opened the hood. He swore again and stepped back to avoid the hissing steam. In the meantime, I went around to the back and got a couple of bottles of Malta India, still perfectly cold and sweet. I handed one to Poppy, and we sipped. The flavor taking me back to hot days like these when we went to Jobo's Beach in Cabo Rojo, and we let the sun burn our dark skin while Mommy surfed the ocean waves that crashed around us. I love how the water chilled my small feet and covered them with sea foam. The mountains on the east of 115 were still snow-capped. It had snowed in the canyons only last week. Now, in the valley, I could have baked cookies on the top of the truck. Did the boy reply? Poppy asked, drying his sweat with a towel that he kept in his back pocket. Despite him calling him the boy, Poppy loved Trent, like everyone else who knew him. Melinda, his mom, my writing teacher, had an impeccable reputation for raising sons and horses. A former Utah State rodeo queen, she was the one who got me into rodeoing when she noticed my 8-year-old awkwardness, which made me feel like a newborn colt trying to find its legs. My love for horses had opened the door to a world I hadn't even known existed. He'll come, I said, licking the sweetness of the soda off my lips. Gritty, reddish desert sand flew into my face when a semi and a minivan drove past. No sooner had the dust settled than I realized the minivan had stopped. A man a little older than Poppy got out and walked toward us, his legs bowed in true cowboy fashion. You folks need help? He asked, holding his white hat so the wind wouldn't blow it away. The van's passenger side mirror reflected a beautiful brunette woman. When we made eye contact, I smiled at her. She glanced at the Malta in my hand and shook her head before going back to looking at her phone. Automatically, I put the Malta back in the cooler, heat burning my face. The amber bottle made it look like beer, and I had a reputation to protect. We got overheated, Poppy said. His accent turned much stronger when he got nervous. The man took a look at the engine and after a few seconds said, I have some coolant that can help. Poppy's shoulders relaxed. Great, thanks. The man came back with a bottle of blue liquid, and while we worked on our truck, he asked, where are you from? Every time we met someone new, it was only a matter of minutes before we got that question. The man's tone was friendly, so I guess that's why Poppy went into the least confrontational answer. We live in Andromeda now, but we're from Puerto Rico. The man's face lit up. I've been to San Juan on a cruise. Beautiful place. Then a cloud dampened his enthusiasm. How are things there now? An uncomfortable silence fell on us. Even without looking at Poppy, I knew he was probably considering how much to say. You know, Poppy answered, the metropolitan area is booming, but the rest of the island is still suffering. He usually didn't share so much, but he must have seen something in the man that encouraged him to open up. The man nodded as if he understood, but did he really? Even if I had a hard time picturing what Abuelita Irma had gone through, not only during the actual storm, but also the terrifying days after, when her world resembled a post-apocalyptic movie, the storm had blown the roof off of her house. And when she come outside, all she seen was the main highway covered with mud and dead palm trees and bushes, torn buildings and electricity poles, and at night, unimaginable darkness. We couldn't get in touch with her for 10 whole days. 10 days and sleepless nights of fear and agony for her and for us, unable to help her. When a neighbor who miraculously had a signal one day let her borrow her phone, and she could finally tell us how things were, that her town had no water or electricity, that some elderly neighbors whose house was far from the main road had died in their beds before anyone could help them, it seemed she was narrating the plot of a horror film. Things still weren't that much better, especially out in the small towns. Electricity went out of every time it rained or the wind blew, but Abuelita wouldn't leave her island. Hurricane season had just started again at the beginning of the month. It hurt too much to think about it. I wished we weren't talking about the situation back home, especially when the man spoke again. Well, he drawled, our country has enough problems of our own. Now that Puerto Rico is back on its feet, they have to help themselves. I mean, we can't be the saviors of the world. Poppy winced as if the man had punched him. Puerto Ricans are American citizens too, you know, I blurted, a little louder than would be considered polite. Unlike Poppy, I didn't have a trace of an accent, and the man looked taken aback. Parali, my dad said, and made a calm down gesture. My face heated up, and it had nothing to do with the temperature. Had I overreacted? I wish I could take my words back. A rodeo queen had to be diplomatic and nice to everyone, after all, but there had definitely been a judgy tone in the man's voice, and I couldn't remain silent. I'm sorry if it sounded like I have anything against the island. I don't, the man said, putting his hands up in a conciliatory sign. Like I said, I love the place. It's beautiful. As if he could sense how uncomfortable was, he looked at me for the first time. His eyes widened in recognition. I know who you are, he explained. The surfer who wants to be a rodeo queen. Uneasy about correcting him again, I bit my next words. I wasn't a surfer just because I was Puerto Rican. Maybe in my riding jeans and sweat-stained long-sleeve t-shirt, I was far from the perfect image of a rodeo queen, but no one could expect me to look regal at all times, right? I just shifted in place. The wind whipped my unruly hair into my face. Actually, she was never much of a surfer, but she sure has a way with horses. Poppy's voice spilled pride for me. Nice to meet you, the man said, and shook my hand. His palm was calloused exactly in the same places mine were from the rub of the leather reins. I can never pronounce your name, Corral. the man said apologetically, and I tried not to flinch at how he butchered it. But I've seen you in some events, and let me tell you, for being a Spanish girl, your form on the horse is a thing of beauty. He glanced at his minivan and continued, my sister Kaylee was the Andromeda Queen when she was in high school, and the queens after her had been fantastic too. Theirs are big boots to fill, but the Western way of life has room for all if they adapt to it. Don't you think? I looked at my dusty checkered vans as I considered which part of his statement to address first. The fact that he called me Spanish, or that I had to prove I was adapting to the gold standard of the Western way of life. Wasn't the fact that I was a good rider proof that I had adapted to it? At what point would I get to just be one of the girls, someone who belonged, and not someone constantly on trial? Usually, though, when I tried to correct the misconception, people thought I was being argumentative. And in this moment, I didn't have the energy to find the perfect words so as not to hurt his feelings. Poppy coughed like he wanted to get my attention before I busted a gasket. But when I looked up, I saw Trent's blue Durango shimmering in the heat on the freeway, speeding in our direction. If the happiness inside me could somehow be licensed, prescribed, and sold, every sadness in the world would be eradicated forever. He finally shows up, Poppy says. I playfully elbowed him and ran to open Trent's door. The man who stopped to help said goodbye and went to his minivan, looking at Trent as if he was trying to place him, or maybe place him with me. But soon he was gone, the van a speck in the distance. Trent smiled from ear to ear as he got out of his SUV. We were only 3 weeks apart in age, his birthday in mid-July and mine at the beginning of August. But he was more than a foot taller than me. He hunched down and I leaned in to kiss his smoothly shaved cheek. Trent's Caribbean blue eyes flew in my dad's direction, but Poppy was grabbing something from the back of the car. Hey, Trent said, the engine overheated? He rummaged in the trunk for a bottle of coolant. I think this will patch you up until we can get you to the exit. We got it, Poppy bellowed, turning his truck engine on after a small cough. The truck came back to life. Trent sent me a questioning look and I shrugged. Vamonos, Poppy explained. Poppy, I said, hoping I wouldn't have to ask aloud. Trent had come all the way here for nothing. I couldn't let him make the drive back by himself. Besides, he was heading to the ranch anyway, and if I rode with him, I'd make it to practice almost on time. Poppy smiled. I know, he said. Follow closely behind so I know I won't be stranded again. Without wasting time, I climbed inside Trent's car and waited for Poppy's truck to get back on the freeway. He stayed in the right lane, hazard lights blinking, but hardly any cars drove his section of the freeway, just an occasional semi or a car full of people heading to Mesquite for a weekend of fun. I fidgeted with the radio and connected my phone to the Bluetooth speakers. Soon, Luis Fonsi and Daddy Yankee were singing the song of a few summers ago, and Trent joined the chorus of Despacito, the only word he knew, as Poppy's truck coasted down the hill toward the exit. It will be nice to sleep in the rodeo, right? He said when the music switched to Bad Bunny. I lowered the volume because this song had a lot more English than the others I listened to, and Trent blushed during the most colorful sections. I can't think that far ahead yet, I said. I hadn't slept in ages since the competition became serious. There was still so much to do this week that my plans started prickling. Palms started prickling. The competition for the Rodeo Queen title included a speech, which I knew even in my sleep. A question and answer section followed, in which the judge's main objective was to see how familiar the contestants were with the sport of rodeo, though they sometimes asked about current global events too. The Queen represents the town for a whole year, carrying the American flag with pride and honor. I'd long ago learned all there was to know about rodeo, and I spent every spare moment getting caught up on the news. My riding uniform of jeans and a light blue shirt for the reigning portion of the contest had been pressed days ago and packed along with the blue dress for the Q&A and the riding dress outfit that Melinda had gifted me, white pants matching an embroidered vest. the one that mommy and I had spent hours modernizing with sequins and expensive Swarovski crystals. Mommy had designed and embroidered the Puerto Rican and the American flags entwined inside a heart. She spent months finishing it. It had taken Melinda hours to tailor it to fit my curves and short stature and to give me the freedom I needed to parade on a horse. I could picture myself acting the speech and the questions, but every time I tried to see myself performing my reigning pattern flawlessly, the ugly private messages blared in my mind until I saw myself fumbling with the reins and falling, looking ridiculous in front of the whole town. Pretty clothes could only help my confidence. So when my insecurities were so loud, a shuddering sigh left my lips, but the pressure in my chest didn't ease up. I just know you're going to get it, Trent said softly, recognizing my nerves. The judges will love you. I smiled at him, but the tension didn't leave my pinched shoulders. For me, a couple pleaser, a people pleaser, an only daughter who had to check off every single item on my parents' unspoken list of unexpected achievements, not being adored by everyone was a thorn in my heart, a sign of failure. But how did I tell Trent this without sounding vain and petty? Just like most people didn't understand that our island still needed help after the hurricane, I didn't think he understood my fears that my background and my present didn't match up. I tried to explain this to him, but he always said not to pay attention to the haters, so I'd stop bringing up the topic. I just looked ahead at the road and the mountains and the endless sky that shone bright, blue as if it were a lake above us. I could almost hear the song of the water. Once we made sure Poppy was safely on his way to his class at the library, Trent drove me to the arena. The familiar scent of horse manure tickled my nose, and the sun glared off the metal of the barn's roof, blinding me. I squinted and saw Melinda waiting for me at the barn entrance. Sweat prickled my underarms, but she went back in as soon as she saw me arrive. See you later, Trent said. I waved at him over my shoulder, and after putting my boots on, I headed for the corral where Sugar Daddy, a painted horse, was waiting for me. He was 21 in human years, but acted like he was 10. We knew each other's quirks, but he was spontaneous and mischievous, which made him perfect for practicing. For the actual competition, I have to ride a horse I choose randomly by selecting a number from a lottery bowl. This was supposed to make it fair for all the participants, but I was nervous just thinking about it. Horses could sense fear and insecurity. With anyone else, I could fake my confidence, but the horse would notice my real feelings as soon as I got close. I had to earn its respect. Sugar Daddy greeted me with a twitch of his ears. Que paso, viejo? I asked, and he whinnied, protesting that I was calling him an old man. While I placed and adjusted the saddle, he flicked his long tail, trying to swat my back. I was ready for his treachery, though. I moved out of the way just before his prickly tail could hit its target. He snorted, and I laughed as I guided him to the indoor arena. Three little girls who couldn't have been older than 10 were walking out, probably just finished with riding lessons. One was golden blonde like Trent, and the other two were as dark as I was, sisters, most likely and probably Latinas. The trio was arguing in hushed voices, but I caught the last words the older Latina girl was telling the younger. Not like you can become a queen, Jazzy. Some girls were cut out for royalty, and others, her jaw fell when she and I made eye contact. After a couple of seconds of awkwardness, she asked, Are you Corrali Estrada? The other girls stared from me to their other friend in wonder. Hi, Jazzy, I said, and the blonde girl softly elbowed the smaller Morenita, who seemed not to remember how to speak. Maybe some girls seem like they aren't cut out to be royalty, I paused, seeing a glimpse of my younger self in her. What would younger me have needed to know? Girls, even girls like us, aren't like fabric or leather. We aren't cut out to be or not to be anything. We're like water and light. You can fit into any space you want to fit into, okay? In my heart, the words felt hollow and fake, like something I'd recite at school or what I write in a yearbook for someone I never really got to know. If I didn't win the crown, would I still feel like I fit in there in this town? As if reading my mind, Jazzy said, my cousin that lives in Nepi, says you won't win. The girl from Provo has family in the area, and the judges will go for somebody local anyway. I knew what she really meant by local, not Latina. The blonde girl nodded. I swallowed, staring at the small girls. They were just repeating stuff they'd hear at home and in other places. I shouldn't take it personally inside, though. A hurricane to rival Huracan Maria bellowed in fury. I am local, I said. The girls raised their eyebrows, skeptical, and walked on, leaving me rooted to the ground, the horse flicking his tail at my legs for me to move him to the shade. Although I wanted to pretend their words hadn't hurt, I understood why the girls didn't believe I could win this rodeo. I'd never met a rodeo queen who looked like me either. But the prize, a scholarship to Utah State University provided by the Daughters of the Pioneers, was too big to let go just because some people didn't believe I could win it. My parents would do anything to put me through college, but I wanted to do something to make their lives easier and for us not to go into debt for my education. I had to win. The girls left, whispering furiously, and Jazzy looked at me over her shoulder. I couldn't even smile at her through the doubts in her eyes, the same doubts that screamed in my mind. Sugar Daddy nickered and bumped his nose against my back, so I quickened my pace, the gravel crunching under my boots. I'm going, I whisper shouted. My eyes hadn't adjusted to the dim light of the arena after the brightness outside when Melinda's voice bellowed. Late again, Corrali. She shook her head. Even Sugar Daddy knows the first rule of rodeoing is crowns are won on the practice ring. Don't be late for the coronation. Melinda held the reins for me. I jumped in the saddle and Sugar Daddy trotted to the hay feeders hanging from the fence, the, op- the opposite of what I wanted him to do. Control him, Melinda said, her voice sharp and a matter of fact. Relax your shoulders and unclench your jaw. You're too tense. I exhaled in an attempt to relax my upper body while I pressed Sugar Daddy with my legs, trying to lead him on a trot around the arena to warm up. When he stubbornly kept going to the hay, I pulled the reins, the knots in the ropes biting into my calloused hands. Sugar Daddy tossed his mane, but he did as I wanted, and soon he fell into an easy canter. I could feel that he wanted to let go and run, but I kept firm pressure on his bit, and soon we synchronized our breathing and I imagined our hearts. Melinda clapped and Sugar's ears twitched again. He started heading toward the entrance of the arena. But just because I could, I pulled on the reins again for him to go around the perimeter once more before heading to the entrance to do our first reining practice of the day. Although he'd been the one trotting, my heart was racing, my breath coming out in gusts. The horse fidgeted under the goal line in the arena entrance. I sighed, trying to ground myself in the moment, seeing myself recreating the 8 maneuvers of my pattern around 3 markers that sat like an isosceles triangle. Melinda yelled, Hi-ya! Sugar Daddy bolted before I was ready. And in the millisecond it took for me to recover, I imagined myself falling through the air. It was only a moment, but Sugar Daddy sensed my distraction. He turned before we had completed our first left circle. No, I gasped and tugged the reins. He circled to the right sharply, and then he beelined to Melinda, who waited for him with a grim expression. By the time she clicked on the chronometer, I was out of breath. My abs clenched with the effort to stay balanced on the misbehaving horse. He didn't even finish the first maneuver, Melinda said. She didn't need to add anything else if I didn't complete the first maneuver. It didn't matter if the rest of the 7 in the pattern were perfect. I scored no points. If I couldn't control a horse I rode every week, how did I expect to control one I had to connect with? I'll try again, I said. This time, I kept pressure on the bit the whole run. Run down the middle. past the end marker, left roll back. First maneuver complete. On to the second maneuver, run down the middle, past the other end marker, right roll back. I counted to 3 under my breath. Run down the middle, past center marker, stop, back up, and hesitate. Sugar Daddy didn't like hesitating, and he bolted for maneuver 4 before I was ready. I clenched my teeth until my jaw hurt. 4 right spins. I guided my horse to the next maneuver, and before he hesitated, I was dizzy, breathing fast. He usually liked what came next, so I left the reins a little looser than I should have. Wide circles to the left, large fast, small slow, large fast, and then a charge. Before I got my bearings, he took me by surprise and headed toward Melinda before we completed maneuvers 7 and 8. The tension bubbled underneath Sugar's skin, matching my disappointment. Again, I said, and before Melinda got the clock reset, Sugar shot out. When I leaned forward to better move with him, I lost one of the reins. As he flashed around the first marker, Melinda's voice rose, trying to get his attention. She tried to intercept him before the second marker, but he changed course and headed to the center of the arena. In the meantime, I managed to grab the fallen rein, but it was too late to recover from this blunder. Sugar reared his head, breaking his run. I wasn't ready for the change of speed. Inertia sent me flying over Sugar's head, and I landed on the rubber that covered the arena floor. I rolled, curling my body and protecting my head. My ears thundered with rushing blood and Melinda's voice as she told off Sugar Daddy, who cantered to the hay, hanging from baskets on the fence. It took a moment for me to understand what had happened. When I was learning how to ride, I'd fallen once, but never since, and never like this. I'd always tell myself I could deal with other people's doubts, that I fed on people underestimating me. But the rodeo was less than a week away, and I wasn't dealing at all. I stood up, my whole soul aching, and brushed the rubber dust from my clothes. Are you okay? Melinda's blue eyes, darker than Trent's, and with an intensity he didn't have, bored into me. Unable to speak, I nodded. If a tongue lashing was coming for everything I'd done wrong, I had to take it stoically. Squaring my shoulders, I raised my chin. You're too distracted, Corrali. Her voice was soft, but the words cut me deeper than the sharpest knife. She pressed her hand on my shoulder, just like she did when she wanted to soothe a panicked horse. Let's end this practice now. You have a week to figure out what you really want. With that, she walked out of the arena, taking the horse with her. As the week stretched on, Melinda's question never left my mind. What did I really want? The more I thought about it, as I exercised at the gym, helped mommy with the laundry, and practiced with Sugar Daddy, the more I realized that the answer was complicated, full of layers. The part of me that was an island girl, that would be forever. Wanted to swim in the blue ocean, hug my grandmother, and help her rebuild her home. The wannabe rodeo queen, however, thought only about the future. She was all focus and determination. She fit so completely into a Western lifestyle that she sought to claim a crown that had only ever been bestowed on girls whose families had been in the area for generations. She was the answer to countless family prayers and promises whispered before an altar. I didn't know how to stretch myself to be both at the same time. The night before the rodeo, Mommy sang me a lullaby, calming as the waves of the ocean from my childhood. I woke before dawn, restless, cocooned in the blanket Mommy had placed on me. I could still smell the traces of the empanadillas and the pastels I delivered last week before I fell from the horse. I thought about the people who support me all summer, listening to my dreams and nodding their heads even when those dreams seemed incomprehensible to them, ridiculous even. An island girl who wanted to become a rodeo queen and represent the whole town. Perhaps I'd been too naive. Perhaps I didn't have what was required to wear the crown. There was no way I'd go back to sleep, so I rolled over and switched on my phone. A flood of notifications dinged through my silent mode. From Jazzy, who followed me on Instagram since the day we met. After the rodeo, will you sign my hat? For me, you're really already a queen. The man who helped us on the highway had commented on my official rodeo page saying, Best of luck, Surfer Queen. Your island will be proud of you and all your hard work, as are we. My chest swelled with emotion. Maybe when he seen me on my old t-shirt and worn pants, he seen all I was ready to sacrifice to represent the Western way of life he loved so much. Friends from school sent me their good wishes. Even one of the girls competing against me, the one from Provo, said she was proud of sharing this journey with me. Family from Puerto Rico I hadn't seen in years commented with crown emojis and hearts. Their love and confidence traveled over the distance and warmed my heart. But it was Abuelita Irma's message that pierced through the fog of fear and self-doubt. She sent me a video from her kitchen. It had still been dark when she made it, and in the background, the coqui frogs and night birds sang their songs. You're the queen of my life, she said, whether you win the crown or not. What makes you a warrior is that you keep trying. Seeing you live your dreams makes the distance a little easier to bear, Mamita. Your light shines bright, Karali. She blew me a kiss and I felt it in my soul. That day at the barn, I told Jazzy, girls aren't like fabric or leather. We're like water and light. You can fit into any spaces you want to fit into. When the words left my mouth, they tasted like lies. But maybe it was a part of me that I hadn't wanted to recognize, speaking up for the first time. What if this part was the one that filled in the gap of who I'd been, where I came from, and the person growing inside my heart? If I was a brave, if I was brave enough to let her bloom. Some people thought that to become a rodeo queen, I had to shed all the parts of me that didn't perfectly match up with the Western way of life. But after all, what was this way of life based on? Its foundations were the same values I grew up with in my immigrant family: courage, optimism, hard work, community. It took courage to leave one's country and start anew in a foreign place. It took courage to wake up every morning to face the unknown. Courage was getting up on that horse after the worst, most embarrassing fall of your life. Without optimism, how did Abuelita Irma tend to her orchids again? How could a little 8-year-old get on a horse and pretend she could fly? And hard work? I learned that work dignifies, even if, like Poppy, you were a professor, mixing dog food, reciting poetry in your mind so you wouldn't forget the rhythm of your mother tongue. Hard work was coming from teaching all day and making pastels and empanadas so your daughter could afford to take writing lessons like mommy did. I dressed in silence, trying to savor each second. The original outfit that Melinda had given me had been expensive to start with. I couldn't put a price into the dreams and hopes sewn onto the fabric. After putting it on, I put on my well-worn and loved brown leather boots that molded to my feet like gloves. The ocean blue hat Poppy had given me for Valentine's sat on my dresser, and when it crowned my head, its weight felt like a blessing. Mommy and Poppy waited for me in the kitchen. Their faces lit up when they saw me. I wished I could gather that light and save it for later so it could help fill in the blanks of me that weren't fully formed yet. I was 17, and while part of me felt like an adult, how many parts were still waiting to develop, I wasn't sure, but I was optimistic. I couldn't wait to see. Later, after I delivered my speech from the heart, embracing my Puerto Ricanness and my Western life, as the sun beat down on the arena, I sat on a white spotted bay horse called Patchwork, waiting all at the goal line. Patchwork's anticipation to perform our reigning pattern exuded from him, or maybe it was my anticipation that he felt and amplified. I smiled at my friends and family who roared back cheers and encouragement. Poppy and Mommy sat next to Trent and waved Puerto Rican and American flags. Melinda smiled because she could see I now knew what I wanted. The sign went off for me to shoot out to the left for the first maneuver, and the horse followed my lead. Each section of the pattern felt like part of me: the island girl, the western girl, and the third, the unknown part of me filled with hope and light that contained multitudes. On the horse, I moved with grace. I learned from my salsa dancing father and the speed of my surfing mother. I commanded the horse with all the authority I'd learned from my trainer, Melinda. I was unstoppable. I felt like one more star in my town, Andromeda, a galaxy tucked in the mountains. And I let my light shine and spread to fill in the gaps.